first about computers from 1998.
All right, sounds good.
So these computers back in 1998, if they had internet access, it was a dial-up modem, correct?
That is correct.
And so the dial-up modem, you had said, made a funny sound when you logged it in?
Yes.
And it's kind of that quintessential, really obnoxious sound?
Very obnoxious, yes.
Okay. And a dial-up modem actually plugged into a phone line.
That is correct.
So whereas today we tend to have cable lines or DSL lines or something like that that comes to our computer,
Correct, yes.
this actually went directly to the same phone jack as your telephone.
Yes.
And that means that when you are working on the internet or looking at stuff on the internet, you couldn't make a phone call.
That is correct.
And anyone who called you would get a busy signal
Correct.
because there was no access if you were on the internet.
That is true, yes.
All right. Now, dial-up also had slower load times than we have today.
Yes, it did.
In fact, if you were downloading a movie back then, it would take all day?
If that, maybe longer.
Right. And whereas today we have Netflix, where we can watch it directly from the internet.
Correct.
And as we said yesterday, Netflix used to actually send out discs in the mail as opposed to actually being able to stream from an app on your computer.
That is correct, yes.
Now, I have a question about hard drives and whether they can be broken by a magnet.
It's always possible. It's be hard to do that. You need a very strong magnet.
Right. It requires a magnet that can create like 450 pounds of force.
Something like that, yeah.
And a magnet, even a big magnet that can pinch your fingers has about 7 pounds of force.
I would have to go with you on that. I'm not sure.
Right. So you actually would need something called a neodymium magnet.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
And even those magnets might not be strong enough. Is that correct?
Sure, yeah.
So this isn't something you could do with a magnet off of your refrigerator.
Very, very unlikely, yes.
So the computer at the Jensen's home had one user on it,
Yes,
and that was the buddy user.
that is correct.
So anyone in the home that would log in would be using that buddy user.
Anybody using the computer would be under the user buddy.
And there was no passwords set up.
No.
And let's talk a little bit about passwords.
Okay.
So today, passwords are a big deal, right?
Yes.
Making sure that your password is complex enough that nobody would be able to guess it.
Yes, correct.
And we always tell people, don't write down your passwords and leave it next to your computer.
That is correct.
And then most websites or email servers, for example, will have requirements of your password these days.
Yes.
Like you have to have at least one capital letter and one number, one special symbol, something like that.
Yes, yes.
That wasn't the case in 1998, was it?
No.
This awareness of keeping passwords secret wasn't a thing back then.
That is correct. Yeah, it was not.
Most people actually kept a list of their passwords right next to their computer.
I wouldn't know, but yeah, I'm assuming people would write it down, yeah.
Well, you were in elementary school.
Yeah.
Now, when we're trying to figure out who was looking at a specific web page or something on a computer, one of the easiest ways to do that, obviously, would be if they had separate logins on the computer.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we can look for like social media.
Yeah, yes.
Or some other identifying thing.
Correct.
Let's say back in 1998, we didn't have as much social media, did we?
Yes, there wasn't as much social media.
Yeah, no Facebook,
Nope.
no Instagram,
Nope.
no Snapchat.
That is correct, yep.
We did have MySpace.
I do remember MySpace, yes.
Did you have a MySpace?
I did for a short amount of time.
But nothing on your examination of the Jensen computer showed any social media.
No social media that I could see.
Now, when you're getting evidence from a computer, you write block that.
Correct.
And write blocking basically makes it so that you can tweak the computer without it actually changing the original hard drive.
For the most part, yeah. So write blocking, essentially, it'd be sort of like the digital equivalent to putting like gloves on your hands in a crime scene.
Okay, so that's really important.
Yes, it's important.
And I think on direct you said that turning on a computer without write blocking is a huge no-no.
Yes.
And all the computer analyst staff knows you never turn on a computer without write blocking.
That is correct.
And in fact, there's trainings given to law enforcement so that they don't turn on the computer without write blocking.
Correct.
And in fact, there's only one very limited exception to that rule, isn't there?
Yes, usually. Yes.
Yeah, and that rule is that we only turn it on if we believe there's going to be evidence where we could save a living person who is in danger.
Correct.
Other than that, you don't do it.
No, you should not do it.
And that's because it's possible to lose evidence.
Potentially. The biggest fear with that is timestamp changes, specifically in system files. But
Yep, so that's what we're talking about, the last written dates.
yes,
And the last access dates can also be changed.
they would be changed on those files that were accessed. Yes.
Right. So then you wouldn't be able to tell when a person on that computer actually last accessed a program.
For the most part, yes, correct.
And you also can end up overwriting data that's in the unallocated space.
That is correct. If you're recreating things or things like that, you would overwrite an unallocated space.
Right. So even on startup, there's files that are created.
Correct.
And when those files are created, I believe there's 4 of them. Is that right?
Yes.
And I believe those are the system.dat, right?
Yes.
And then there is a user.dat,
Yes.
win.ini,
Yes.
and then system.ini.
Yes.
And these all end up being saved into a cabinet file.
Yes.
Now, this is actually a larger cabinet file because system.dat and user.dat are pretty big files, aren't they?
Yes. Yes.
Now, you're aware that this computer was started on December 17th,
I am aware. Yes.
and it was started without write blocking.
Correct.
And so when they started it up, we created those 4 files in that cabinet file.
Yes. You created an updated version of those files from the last. Yes.
And there's also Quicken backups that happened on December 17th, right?
Correct.
And did you actually see those Quicken backup files?
I did not know.
Well, you're aware that you're not the first analyst to look at this computer,
Yes.
at any of these computers that we're talking about today.
Correct.
In fact, there was at least 2 prior analysts.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Martin Koch
Yep.
and a Rhonda Mitchell, right?
Yes.
Now, when you did your analysis of this computer, did you look at what they did in this matter?
I read over their testimony and saw some of their reports and everything like that. I didn't go through absolutely everything that they did, though.
So you are aware that so you read Martin Koch's testimony?
Yes, yes.
All of it?
If I recall correctly, yes, I read all of it.
So you're aware that he did find the Quicken files for the home account, right?
Correct, yes.
And in fact, he prepared a log or printed out a log of that account?
I believe so, yes.
I'm going to show you now Exhibit D65.
Okay.
65 is the register.
Thank you.
Do you recognize what this is?
I actually do not, to be honest.
Okay. What does it look like?
It looks like some sort of balance sheet.
For a checking account, right?
Correct.
And you recall in Martin Koch's testimony in 2008 that he indicated that he was able to access the 3 different accounts from Quicken.
Correct, yes.
And the first was the Jensen account.
I'd have to go off of recollection at that, yeah.
But that was there was an investment account under Jensen.
That's what I heard, yes.
And then there was an investment account under Sorensen.
Yes.
And then there was a checking balance account that was called Home.
Yes.
And does that appear to be an investment account?
No, it does not.
It's a checking balance sheet.
Yes, looks like a personal checking.
So that would be the home account?
I would have to take your word for it that it's the home account, but yes.
I'm now showing you
Thank
Exhibit
you.
D66. Do you know what D66 is?
So I haven't seen this, but I remember it from the testimony.
And what is that?
This appears to be the Quicken backup files or the Quicken files.
And it shows that there was backups done on each of the Quicken accounts, right?
Correct.
And the home account, there's a number of backups that were completed.
Yes.
And that includes as late as November 30th in the afternoon.
Yes.
Are you aware that that was a weekday?
Yes.
And then there was November 28th at 3:42 p.m.
Yes.
And that's also a weekday?
Correct.
We've got November 11th at 2:52 p.m.
Hold on. Let me look.
Having trouble finding that one?
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Can you find the October 19th at 10:52 a.m.?
Did you say October what?
19th?
19th? Am I looking at this wrong? I don't see the October
Okay.
19th on here.
But it's fair to say that there were backups
There were
of the Quicken
backups.
account for home happening.
Correct.
And they were happening on weekdays during the day?
Correct.
Additionally, there's backups for the Sorensen files that happened on weekdays as well.
Correct, yes.
And
that's what
during
it
those
appears.
magic business hours that we talked about yesterday between 8 and 5?
Correct.
Quicken, you don't have to be on the internet to use Quicken.
No, you do not.
In fact, the Quicken program runs perfectly fine without internet.
It does.
And when you are leaving Quicken, it gives you the option of whether or not to back up, right?
I'm not 100% sure on that.
Would that make sense?
That would make sense. Yes, it would make sense.
Fair to say you're not an expert in Quicken?
That is fair to say, yeah.
especially Quicken 98?
Yes, yes. I tried to do my research on it. There's not a whole lot there from 98.
Now, on that last backup sheet, you can see that there was backups done on December 17th, right?
Correct.
So on December 17th, someone went into Quicken
Correct.
and ended up backing up all 3 of those accounts.
That is, yes, that's what it shows.
And so when you do a backup like that, that's more data that is being saved onto the allocated space.
Correct.
Now, when you save something into allocated space, that can push other items out of unallocated space, right?
Well, overwrite, yes, yeah.
Overwrite?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not really a pushing, it's more of a writing over it.
Yes.
And the more things that you do on the computer when you have it started up, the more data that could be overwritten.
That is correct. That's
So in this case, turning on that computer on December 17th made a couple of problems in your analysis. Is that true?
It did cause some issues, yes.
The first is what we're just talking about here, is when they created files, they actually overwrote potentially some things that were in the unallocated space.
Yes, potentially overwrote or partially overwrote.
And those are things that unfortunately we can just never get back.
That's correct, yes.
They're gone.
Correct.
And additionally, we talked a little bit about this, but I want to talk a little further about it. This 20-day rule.
Yes.
What is the 20-day rule?
So the 20-day rule, especially in some of the older computers with internet history files and things like that, those system files will automatically start overwriting the older files after 20 days, just as a means to basically maximize the space that you have on your computer.
So when you turn something on December 17th, there's the potential for overwriting anything before the 29th of September.
There is a chance, although
November.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. There is a chance, but the likelihood, because it would go into the unallocated space when it's overwritten, it's not double overwriting itself. So it would just be moved into that unallocated space.
Right, and then
20 days.
anything that you did on the computer has the potential to overwrite it.
Potentially the older stuff. So, for example, if you're going into a certain file on that day, updating it, it would update the older stuff related to that file folder.
And unfortunately, because it's just gone, you can't even tell us what that would have been.
For the most part, no. There's something called slack space, which is also a type of unallocated space. Because of how a hard drive is made up, it's usually made up in clusters of amounts of data, and sometimes files do not fill up those entire clusters. So there's space at the end of the files that is open that you can get, but for the most part, you can't recreate everything.
So if we thought about the unallocated space like a bunch of blocks,
Yes.
then if I delete a file and it doesn't fill up in a block entirely, the next thing I delete could potentially take up part of that block as well as part of another block too.
It'd be somewhat more the other way around. It would be, so data is stored in those blocks. When you delete it, those blocks remain the same, and then if you start writing over it, then it starts filling up that block space.
All right, so I had it backwards.
Yes, yeah.
But basic idea.
Yes, I got it, yeah.
And so if the unallocated space gets rid of one cube, there could be potentially full files that are gone, but some are partially still there?
It's possible, but those files would have had to already be deleted.
Okay. And I'm just talking about unallocated space here.
Yes. Yes, if there's a deleted file in unallocated space, yes.
So that's why you say that sometimes you can partially recover
Correct.
things from unallocated space?
Correct.
Now, a few times during your direct examination, you talked about from what I could recover.
Correct, yes.
And that's because you don't know if there's things that weren't recovered out of unallocated space as they were overwritten.
Yeah, there's no way for me to know what isn't there.
Now, going back to the Jensen computer, we talked about some ways to know who is sitting in front of a computer.
Correct.
Right. And because there was no social media or anything like that on this case, you actually have to look at the data and try to compare it to other things to determine if anyone was there and who it was.
Correct. So, like, you'd have to compare to times when somebody's home, types of sites that somebody's usually going to, things like that.
Right. And so if there's two adults at home at the same time and the internet is accessed, you wouldn't be able to tell me who that is based on the computer itself.
Without knowing the background of the individual and the types of websites they're going to, I wouldn't be able to physically do that.
And making those type of connections, that's not your job. It's your job to analyze the computer and bring the data.
Yeah, my job is to show you what's on the computer and the nerdy side of things.
So now you were shown an internet history that you had created, right?
Yes.
Now you'd said the computer was originally turned on in July,
Yes, yes.
but there's actually some things in that predate July of 1998, isn't there?
Correct.
How's that happen?
So a lot of files come to your computer, so if you are ever like me and you like looking at some of that old stuff, you can see when certain files are originally created back in whatever warehouse they were created at, because everything has timestamps. Microsoft often, like all businesses, I'm not going to pick on Microsoft, reuses a lot of things. So you might have files that have dates from, in this case, dates from like 1999 or 1996, 1997 that are on your computer. You didn't have your computer in 1996, 1997 because those are system files that the company itself made, and those dates remain the same. So, yes.
And that also can indicate that you're transferring something over from an old computer, right?
It is possible.
So things like there's, I believe, a baby shower that was
Yes.
predating.
I recall.
Did you look at that file?
I believe I looked at if I'm thinking of the correct one, yes, I believe I looked at it.
I'm going to show
Thank
you
you.
Defense Exhibit 67. Do you recognize that?
I do indeed.
What is it?
This is a baby shower invitation, and it was, I believe the program it was created on was Publisher,
And how do you know it was created on Publisher?
because I recognize it because I remember looking at this exact image.
What is Microsoft Publisher?
So Microsoft Publisher is to kind of simplify it, it's essentially a means to design your own cards, and I guess you could design your own books and stuff like that, book covers.
Now, on the back of that, there's some writing, right?
Yes.
And what does that indicate?
It indicates an invitation to Robin and Doug's baby shower by the Jensens.
And who do you have to RSVP to for the party?
Julie.
And then it gives a phone number?
Correct. Although it's a little bit broken up on here, but yes, it gives a phone number.
You saw that on the
Yes,
computer
yeah,
screen.
yeah.
So even though my copy isn't perfect, it is a true and accurate representation of what you saw on the computer.
Correct.
Now, there's a difference between an internet and an intranet, right?
That is correct, yes.
So internet is when we're talking about the World Wide Web.
Yes, so if you think about networking and computers, the intranet is literally the network of networks. So it's networking a bunch of different networks together.
And then an intranet is actually specific to a company or a website or something like that.
Yeah, so an intranet would be a network, like an individual network. Like, for example, some of your jobs might have internal systems, internal files, and things like that you have to log into, or there might be certain websites that you can only access at work. That would be an intranet.
And typically, to get into an intranet, you'll need a password.
Correct.
Did you see any indication on your analysis that there was a password needed to get into the intranet?
I only saw that the intranet was actually accessed. I didn't see specifically how it was accessed, whether it was logged in or it was just saved on the computer.
So you don't know if you had to put in a password or not?
I would only speculate.
Please don't do that.
Yes.
But so once you're in an intranet, you have the ability to access just about everything on that network, right?
Yeah, whatever security permissions that you have.
Now, in this case, there was logins to the Stifel intranet.
Correct.
And so anyone who gets into the intranet from the Jensen home computer could look at the information on there.
Yeah, as long as they had access to it, yes.
And when we're talking about that Stifel intranet, that also included the email server.
Correct.
I want to talk specifically about the searches and or websites accessed from October 16th of 1998.
Okay.
So this early morning string of searches, there's a Yahoo search for drugs,
Yes.
then a Yahoo search for botulism.
Correct.
Then we end up at a website defining botulism.
Correct.
Then we end up with this website on nitrate.
Correct.
And that website on nitrate actually indicates that it shows up, botulism shows up naturally in food and drink.
I guess so. I don't fully recall what it said on those websites.
Well, it was talking about a meat cure, right?
I'm objecting. We're getting into the content of the website, which I thought the defense wanted an instruction against.
I thought we all agreed that any website we can't believe.
That is true, but I'd like to talk about what was displayed.
Well, we know it was in food and drink, so let's move on. Okay?
So then we had a search on botulism in low-acid canned foods,
Correct.
again about food and drink.
Yes.
And we have an article on botulism,
Correct.
another search for botulism.
Correct.
Then we end up at this page called the recipe link.
If I recall, yes.
And that's a place where you could search for different recipes.
I believe so. Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not, but from what the website looked like, yeah.
You haven't used the recipe link yourself?
I don't even know if it's I don't know how many of those websites are even
You weren't
around
an elementary
anymore.
school chef?
No. I did home ec, but I don't think anybody wants me to cook. So
Well, and then we end up with another search for botulism, and that lands us at a page about flavored oils and their potential for botulism.
I believe I recall that, yes.
So then, again, we're talking about food and drink.
Possible, yeah. Like in this case right now, while we're talking, yes.
Just what the page showed.
What the page showed, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Well, flavored oils are something you would.
I believe you would probably put into food. I don't know.
Do you recall on that page that there's actually a notation about the possibility of poisoning your friends by giving them flavored oils?
Based on the totality of the searches in that time frame, I could assume that yes, poisoning was in there somewhere.
And then we finally end up with the search for poisoning.
Correct.
And then after that, we don't have another access until that night.
Correct.
And it actually starts again at 11:57 p.m.,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And at 11:57 p.m., we end up with this first thing being an article about a guy who tried to pipe bomb his wife.
Yes.
He was not successful.
He was not, no.
It was an attempted pipe bombing of his estranged ex-wife.
Yes.
And it was an article talking about his charges and the allegations.
Correct.
And his sentencing, right?
Yes, it was like a sentencing article, correct.
Right, and he got something like 50 years.
Yep.
So then we moved on to a site about mercury fulminate.
Yes.
But there's no search in between that you saw.
None that I was able to recover, no.
And then we have this going to pool fun.
Yes.
And that talks about reversing the polarity of a pool filter.
I believe that was in there, yes.
Do you know that reversing the polarity on a pool filter is actually how you would dissolve scale from the electrodes in the pool filter?
I'm objecting. How would this?
That's sustained. I mean, he's not a pool expert.
Okay.
He's an IT expert, so let's stick to the area.
Just wanted to know if you knew.
I understand. Let's continue.
You can't guarantee that any of the information on that would actually be able to harm a person.
I would not. I mean, I know that website, and I know that it's not all accurate. Some of it is. I don't know.
Well, and then we end up with some nicotine searches, right?
Correct.
Then there's a look at these Stifel branch listings.
Correct.
Now, there's an email between Mr. Jensen and Ms. Labonte that was accessed.
Correct.
Now, that email was actually sent during the afternoon hours
Yes.
at like 3:25 in the afternoon,
Yes.
not when it was being accessed here.
Not when it was being read and recorded as being read. Correct.
Okay. And so then we have a listing of the Colorado Springs office.
Yes.
And about 1 a.m., we end up with the Stifel Find Names website.
Correct.
And I think it's fair to say that a search was done for the first name Kelly.
That I don't recall, honestly. I think I remember that was in there, yes, but I'd be...
Well, the next page that you saw was a bunch of Kellys.
Oh, yes. My apologies, yes.
So whoever did this search must have been looking for a Kelly without a last name,
Correct.
because you ended up with a Kelly Labonte, a Kelly McDonald,
Yes.
a Kelly Snyder,
I believe you. I don't remember
and a
all
Kelly
the...
whose last name I'm not even going to try to pronounce.
Yeah, I believe.
So whoever did that search didn't put in a last name,
Correct.
because otherwise you would have been limited to whatever that last name
That
is.
seems fair, yeah.
And these searches on December 2nd and 3rd. Now, there's this first search that we talked about is this search for paroxetine.
Yes.
And that happened at about 4:35 in the morning.
Correct.
then there wasn't another web page or anything that you saw for about 3.5 hours.
Correct.
And that next search would have been at about 8:16 a.m.?
That sounds right, yes.
Now, these December 2nd ethylene glycol searches occur in that magic weekday business time of between 8 and 5, right?
Correct. They occur between that time period, yes.
Right. And this is the first time that we see any site that actually gives descriptions of ethylene glycol.
I do not believe so. I believe ethylene glycol was searched earlier than that, but that I'd have to look at the actual record itself.
Which record would help you more, the PowerPoint or the list?
Probably the total list.
Okay. Clerk, could you turn us on, please? There we go. Say, how would you like to do this, Mr.
So the easiest way probably would be if you do just like a Control F and then type in.
You want to say for the record what we're looking at? Because is it an exhibit that's been marked, or is it the PowerPoint?
I think this is,
From Exhibit 55.
Okay.
The Exhibit 55 includes the thumb drive. So it has this internet history that was testified to on direct as well as the PowerPoint.
All right, thank you.
If you want to type in like Ethel or something like that, just so I can see which dates it was again.
Well, there was a notation of ethylene glycol on a search page from November 10th,
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
But that was not what was being searched for at that point in time.
I don't believe so. No, I don't know. Yeah.
It just showed up on the page.
It's on the page, yes.
And that's actually the first time you see ethylene glycol was that November 10th page.
That sounds about right. Yes.
Then, do you recall seeing it again until December 2nd?
I am not aware. There's so many dates. I don't
Okay.
remember.
Look at the search results here for glycol. It's coming back to December, right?
Okay. Yes.
So, fair to say that
Fair to say. Yes.
well, yeah. And then we have the anatomy.atom.com,
Correct.
and that search started at about 11:45 in the morning.
Correct.
And that's again within that magical weekdays between 8 and 5 time, right?
That is between 8 and 5. Yes.
Now, we don't actually have like a computer webcam that could show us who was sitting there,
No.
not on this computer.
No.
And we don't have like, in fact, when you were given the computer to work on, or when it was given to the crime lab, I should say,
Yes.
was there a monitor included?
That I don't even know because I was working off of the forensic images.
Okay, so you never saw a keyboard
No.
or a mouse,
None of the peripherals. No.
and you're not aware of any testing done on those?
Nope. Nope.
All right. Now, we talked a little bit about November 10th, right?
Correct.
Now, on November 10th, there was an alt.suicide news group that was signed up for. Did you see that in your analysis?
I did see it, yes.
What's a news group?
So back in the day, this was probably even before, well, around the time, if people remember, like AIM or instant messaging and stuff like that, there were also things called bulletin board systems, which is, without going too deep into it, it's very similar to that. So they were essentially groups where people could talk about certain topics related to whatever, in addition to each other. So, yeah.
I think most people are familiar because of alt.scientology.
That I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know.
But these were basically a place where you could sign up and then be a part of these bulletin boards.
Yeah, so the bulletin board systems, you would generally have to connect through some sort of like IP protocols and things like that. So yes.
Now, also on November 10th, there was searches for suicide.
Correct.
In fact, there was a page accessed, included a search about physician-assisted suicide.
Yes.
There's a web page about Noel Early,
Yes.
and he, according to what you saw,
Yes.
was an advocate for physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia.
From what was portrayed on the webpage, yes.
We don't know if that's true or not.
Yes, correct.
Just like we don't know about the polarity of pools being true or not.
Correct.
Now, November 10th, like I said, was the first time that we saw any reference to ethylene glycol in the computer.
Yes.
Now, Ms. McNeil had you read one of the links on the toxicology website, right? Or the searches?
Yes. Well, she showed it to me and I said yes, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, that was under the search for toxicology, right?
Correct.
And we can't say that anyone actually clicked on that link.
Clicked on the actual toxicology or the website that...
The website that says ethylene glycol.
There was nothing saved that I could see, no.
Right. So, and the next page that you saw was about nicotine.
Correct.
Now, with all of these searches, there's nothing in the computer specifically that says this was searched by Mark Jensen or this was searched by Julie Jensen, correct?
I wouldn't be able to tell who was physically hands on the keyboard.
Right. And there's no way that the computer could tell you that based on what was available at 1998.
You just have to go off of internet history and who's looking at what.
No further questions.
Redirect?
Do you still have the paper exhibits in front of you?
Yes.
I'm just going to get the number.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
So looking at Exhibit 67, is that the invitation?
Yes.
Do you have any idea who Doug or Robin are?
I have no idea who Doug and Robin are.
Do you have any idea whose friends they are?
I do not.
And when you looked at the program that would have been used to create that invitation, is what you see there on the page, is that essentially a template?
Yes, it's a template.
So nothing too creative happened, just someone typing into a template?
Yes.
And then looking at Exhibit 66, these Quicken access times,
Yes.
do you have any idea what was actually happening with the Quicken program during those times?
I do not. It looks, yeah, I do not.
So you can't tell if something was being edited or added or anything like that?
No, they look like updates.
Okay, and so what do you mean by it looks like updates?
Just based on the how it's going, the last accessed, file created, and last written, it's basically happening in a matter of like 2 seconds in each item. So the update was created. For example, let's look at. I'll just pull up the first one. It says that it was created. This is November 30th, 98, at 2:29:36 seconds, and then it was last written 2:29:38 seconds. So that looks like it was just a file update.
And is that something that would happen automatically, or do you know about Quicken?
It could possibly happen automatically.
And so this exhibit here doesn't really tell you what activity is actually happening on Quicken.
No.
And there's some reference on this Quicken both to Jensen and to Sorensen, correct?
Correct.
And we saw on the screen the Sorensen account with all the stocks.
Correct.
And again, you wouldn't have any knowledge of who that actually is,
I do not.
or why someone would be accessing that on the Jensen home computer.
No.
And then the last thing for this exhibit, 66, for these times, do you know whether they would be the Pacific times or whether they would be the Central times?
I would have to know a little bit more about Quicken, just because it would be based off of if it's a web-based thing. So if the web had to be accessed, it would be in Pacific time.
So if these times are being pulled based upon the internet being accessed and what you explained to us about the computer being on Pacific time, then these are Pacific times.
Correct.
Versus 1998 Quicken, whether this was actually accessed through the internet.
Correct.
And did you try to find information about 1998 Quicken?
I did.
Was it pretty limited?
It was very limited, yes.
Okay, so that's just an unknown to you as you sit
To
here
me,
today.
yes. Yeah.
Whether these times are accurate for Central Time or not.
It would be, yeah, speculation.
Now, you described for us that based on what occurred on December 17th, that some files in the, I think, did you say the unallocated space would be overwritten?
Correct.
Okay, and why would that have occurred with the booting of the computer?
So the files that would have likely been overwritten, it would have been based on however large those system files were when they're overwritten. What would have been recreated are those system files, and their timestamps would have changed. Because if you remember yesterday, I kind of explained how computers are essentially giant filing systems, sort of like a card catalog or something like that. So it'd be sort of like, to give you an example, it'd be like, let's say you go to a library, you check out a book, the librarian marks when you check it out, you turn it back in, they mark when you check it back in. That would have been basically what was overwritten.
And is it fair to say that when a computer is normally being used and it's being turned off or turned back on, that's just happening all the time?
Yes.
So it's not something that was unique to December 17th of 1998. Throughout the use of this computer, if it's being turned off and turned back on, that same thing is happening.
Correct, in that sense.
And just to be clear, when we went through this internet history, all of those dates and times, was that impacted at all by the computer being turned on December 17th?
Those dates and times, no.
So those are accurate?
Yes.
So if we were seeing those searches for ethylene glycol on the 2nd and the 3rd, that didn't just appear on those dates and times because of some change from December 17th, correct?
No.
And in fact, when we're talking about dates and times being changed due to the computer being booted on December 17th, we're actually talking about the date being changed to December 17th.
Correct, yes.
And so because you have knowledge of what occurred on December 17th, you know to not attribute December 17th dates to any suspect.
That is correct.
Now, you were asked some questions about the search for botulism and the various things that were accessed, correct?
Yes.
And the search was just for the word botulism.
Correct.
Okay, so it wasn't more specific like botulism in cooking or how to avoid botulism when I can foods or whatever.
Yeah, it was simply botulism.
And that series of searches is the one that ended in the search for poisons, correct?
Correct.
Now, we went through in great detail the use of the computer and the dates and times in which it was being used over the months of use that we had, correct?
Yes.
And you showed on the screen, or we saw on the screen, those calendars of the dates and times.
Yes.
And almost never was the computer being accessed from the 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. times in terms of the internet.
That is correct.
And then we talked about December. We talked about December 2nd and December 3rd.
Correct.
Those dates and those times are pretty unique in the use of the computer internet, correct?
Correct.
And so when we're talking about the regular use of this computer over the course of months, when a person who has a 9-to-5 type job would be at their job, the internet wasn't being used.
Objection misstates the evidence.
Overrule, go ahead, answer the question.
It seems that way, yes.
And in fact, when we did see specific times during those months, during the day when there was internet activity, I showed you on the internet history what was happening, correct?
Correct.
And it didn't appear to be browsing sessions.
Correct.
So that would make December 2nd and December 3rd different in terms of the usage of the internet during those daytimes.
That is correct.
Now, you were asked some questions about November 10th, and the search is done beginning with suicide
Yes.
and then physician-assisted suicide.
Correct.
And then among the string of searches happening on that day, one of them was nicotine.
Yes.
Now, clearly, in terms of who is actually sitting at this computer when this activity is occurring, there's really no way to know that.
Correct.
And even in modern times, you still don't have a camera recording someone sitting in front of a computer when you analyze current computers today, right?
For the most part, yes.
Computers hopefully are not recording us as we're sitting in front of them, right?
Correct, unless somebody's recording themselves.
So even today, when you're doing an investigation, if there is a question in terms of who was at the computer and who was using it, you have to look for some type of context clues.
Yes.
Now, for instance, it could be very easy where there's a login and a password,
Yes.
and so it makes it unlikely that it's anyone but the person who's logged in,
Yes.
but not impossible if their password is available or someone knows it.
Yes, that's correct.
But this computer was not that way because the username was Buddy and there was no password.
Yep.
And so when examining this computer to determine, well, who was using it, who was conducting these searches, you had to look for clues.
Yes.
So clues like that might align with the person's life and with their interests, right?
That is true, yes.
So things like fishing,
Correct.
things like what to do in Chicago,
Correct.
and things like vacationing at Big Cedar.
Correct.
And so whether that means anything to you personally as the computer analyst, that's what you're looking for in terms of clues of who's accessing the computer.
Yes.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Recross?
Just a couple questions. And I apologize to get back into Quicken, but we're going to get back into Quicken.
Fine.
So the Quicken backup files, those are when someone like basically is saving the Quicken information.
I can only say what I know about backup files in general. I wouldn't be able to say specifically on Quicken backup files because backup files can vary from program to program.
Okay. So that's not a question you can answer
No.
You just know that these files were created at that
Yes,
point.
from this document, yes, there's,
And you know that whoever was
Yes.
doing the backup, or whenever a backup is created, someone was using Quicken.
the Quicken program was on, yes.
And again, we don't know who that was by basically just looking at the computer.
Correct,
We've got to look at context clues.
correct.
Now, Quicken, we know, at least we believe, you had testified to already, it doesn't require the internet to work.
No,
So this is not a web-based program that would have problems with the times on there.
no, it shouldn't, well, honestly, I don't know, because the Quicken program itself can be opened up like most programs, but it did have a web-based portal on it, so like it had a stock ticker in there as well, so I don't know what accesses what specifically.
So you can't say that the dates and times on there are wrong.
I can't say they're right or wrong.
And you can't say that they're Pacific time.
I cannot.
Anything like that would just be a guess.
Exactly.
So what we have is those dates and times,
Just this document, yes.
nothing further.
You are excused, thank you. The state's next witness.
So, Judge, we have certified documents that we've agreed upon that show the dates of when divorce was filed by Julie Jensen. So I would just like to read that out loud to the jury at this time.
Is there an agreement from the defense as to that?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. McNeil.
So this is exhibit number 61. And so Exhibit 61 indicates that a petition for divorce was filed by Julie C. Jensen on June 24th of 1991 regarding her husband, Mark D. Jensen. And then let me get the correct day. Then on dated the 27th day of June 1991 and signed by both Julie Jensen and Mark D. Jensen was a stipulation to dismiss the divorce filing. And I think that filing date, if I can read it correctly, is July 15th of 1991, but it was signed by the parties on June 27th of 1991.
All right, that should be marked and made part of the record if it's a stipulation.
It is marked.
So
And what number is it?
that is 61.
All right, 61 is going to be received then.
And so, Judge, I hate to violate the rule, but we do have some afternoon video. These are short. These are very short.
I hope your definition of short is the same as mine.
Less than half an hour. How about that?
All right.
Okay.
Your Honor, before we go on break, I would move exhibits 66, 67, I believe 55 into evidence if that hasn't already been moved.
All right, those are received also.
Okay.
Okay.
And is that all the exhibits that I used from that one? Oh, also move 65.
I think they're still there.
They're up front.
They were all put on the desk, or the table.
We would also move Exhibit 14. That's the Joanne Klug written statement. We forgot to ask for that to be moved into evidence previously.
It's coming in.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I'm just standing before we do the video, so. All right, let's do the video, and then we all take our break, okay? exhibit is this, Ms. McNeil?
So the first one will be States Exhibit 17.
Thank you.
Okay.
And what are we going to be watching, Ms. McNeil?
So this is States Exhibit 17. This is Joan Scully. However, it doesn't want to show on the screen right now, so it is my screen. I just got to go to a setting.
Please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Could you please state your first name and spell your last name?
Joan Scully, S-C-U-L-L-Y.
Ms. Scully, did you know Mark Jensen?
Yes,
And did you, in fact, work with him?
yes.
Do you recall where it was that you worked with Mark Jensen?
Robert Baird and Company?
And at what time were you employed at Robert Baird?
With Mark or in my entire
Let's
time?
start with when you were employed there.
I was employed in 1984
And how long did you work there?
till 2004.
At some point, did Mark Jensen join the office?
I think it was either 1992 or 93. Probably 93.
Okay. And how long did Mr. Jensen work at Robert W. Baird?
Till 1998.
Did he leave Robert W. Baird to go to Stiefel, Nicholas, and Racine?
Yes.
What was your job at Baird between 1992, 93 to 1998?
We opened the new branch in Kenosha, and I had worked in Racine, and I went with the manager at Baird to join the Kenosha branch.
Okay.
My title was Branch Operations Supervisor.
What were some of your responsibilities as branch operations supervisor?
It was mainly in the clerical end within it.
Did you open all mail that came into Robert W. Baird?
I did, or one of the other assistants would.
Was it your primary responsibility?
Yes.
And why is it that you opened the mail that came into Robert W. Baird?
I think I might have even started earlier, so I just did. There was a morning envelope that came from the home office, but our regular mail came at noon, so I would pick that up on my way back from lunch.
Do you know whether the brokers were permitted to open their own mail?
They just never did.
Okay.
No.
During the time that Mark Jensen worked at Robert W. Baird, did he ever indicate to you that he was receiving mail that contained sexually explicit photos?
No.
Did he ever indicate that he was receiving packages or envelopes on his car window in the parking lot that contained sexually explicit photos?
I don't think so, no.
Did he ever?
Martin, I didn't hear your answer.
I don't think so. I don't really remember him ever.
Did he ever indicate to you that he was being harassed in any way at the workplace?
No.
During the time that you would open mail addressed to Mark Jensen, well, did you open mail addressed to Mark Jensen?
I may have. I can't remember for sure.
And do you recall whether you opened any mail for Mark Jensen that contained any sexually explicit photographs
No.
or images?
No.
Back in 1990 or 1991, someone who had a Series 7 broker's license, what would their job function or job responsibilities include?
An assistant would be registered, and she would be able to actually take orders from clients.
How would that person take orders? By what mechanism? In person, by phone?
It would probably be a phone call if the broker she assisted was on another line, and then she could help the client.
Do you know at that time in 1990 or 91 whether orders were placed over the internet?
I don't think they were on the internet. They went through our system.
Your system, can you describe that system at that time?
I think we had regular stations for listed stocks would go to one station, and the over-the-counter would go to another station in Milwaukee. And then, see, I'm a little behind on the time frame, but eventually, I believe the brokers could enter their own. So a ticket would come up and you'd fill in the
And was this
order.
done by phone? Placing the orders was
No,
done by phone?
over the computer.
Okay. But back in 1990 or 1991, was it done?
It was done on one of our machines,
Not a computer?
but not like an internet.
Nothing further.
Mr. Albee?
When you say one of our machines, is it a dedicated computer as opposed to like the internet?
It would be just to email back and, not email, that's wrong. No, send messages to the home office. We did money wires that way. We did, I think we had a log securities that came through, and the orders were put through that way.
So some sort of pre-internet computer communication kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Your office, Ms. Scully, was at 5525 Green Bay Road?
Correct.
We had some information about a telephone call at the Jensen's house from a Tina Thomas whose address was 6015 55th Street. Would that have been near that address on Green Bay Road? 6015 55th Street in Kenosha?
We were right at the intersection of 56th, I believe. 56 streets. There's that avenues that
And so would that be pretty close to your office then? 6015 55th Street?
sounds like it.
Yeah, okay. Let me ask if you've ever seen a particular postcard, and I'll just ask you to turn your attention to the screen behind you. Do you recall ever seeing this postcard? It's the last page of Defendant's Exhibit 20.
No.
That is the address.
That is our address.
And that postcard also was, it has a postmark on it, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You have to say yes for the
Yeah.
court report. Okay, so if that came into the office while you were there, you apparently didn't personally receive that, or you just don't recall it?
I don't recall that at all.
Okay. Did Mr. Jensen ever speak with you about his wife having an affair, you recall?
No.
Would you have had that kind of personal conversation with Mr. Jensen?
No.
I take it you're not aware of Mr. Jensen actually receiving any kinds of packages at work during that period of time, correct? And you have no idea whether he's ever claimed that he received any kind of pornographic items at work during that time, correct?
Correct.
Thanks. I think you were asked whether you opened Mark Jensen's mail specifically, and was it your answer that you can't remember for sure?
Well, I would have opened any mail that came into the office.
Okay.
And then make copies of the letters, and then I look at them.
So you took in that mail that came at noon for Mark and also for all the other
For the
people?
office.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Scully.
Any question, Ms. Gabrielle?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down.
Judge, I would ask that we show that exhibit that was shown during that video to the jury.
Do we have that exhibit, Ms. McNeil?
I do. I can show it if you want.
Okay.
If you could, Madam Clerk, if you could flip on my computer. Judge.
Yeah, let's mark it. It's the prudent thing to do.
Is my computer on?
Postcard you're talking about, right? Okay. Do you want to mark it?
I will have it marked. I got to pull
All right.
it, Judge. Okay, we're good.
Okay, thank you. That video's done, right?
That video is done, so the state would move Exhibit 17,
It'll be received.
and then the next video is Exhibit 18.
All right, do we have any exhibits that we're going to have to show when we do 18?
I don't think so.
All right, that's good news. And which witness is in Exhibit 18 now?
You want the number?
Yeah, that would help.
So this is number 57,
57,
Marion Passetti.
Marion Passetti for the record. P-A-C-E-T-T-I, Marion, normal spelling.
All right, and then if, I know your clerk is busy, we just have to switch it back.
It'll be received, thank you.
Please raise your right hand. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Ms. Passetti, could you state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Marion Passetti, P-A-C-E-T-T-I.
And Ms. Passetti, how are you employed? Or how are you employed?
You mean when I worked?
When you worked,
I was
yes.
an RN.
Okay. And where did you live? Where do you live?
Well, is that relevant?
Okay. Where did you live in 1998?
9039 Lakeshore Drive.
And how long had you lived there
At the time of,
at the time?
let's see, 83. We moved there in 83. In 98 would be what? 83, 12 years?
Close enough. Did you come to know Mr. and Mrs. Jensen?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Did you come to know Mr. and Mrs. Jensen?
Yes,
And how did you meet Julie Jensen?
I met her as a neighbor, but then they asked me to join the book club.
How close were your homes to each other?
Julie's house was across the street and 2 houses north of mine.
Okay. Did you have frequent contact with Mrs. Jensen?
In the summertime I did, when she would be outside, not as much in the winter, but of course at book club.
Okay. In the summer of 1998, did you have contact with Mrs. Jensen?
Yes.
And what kind of contact did you have?
Well, besides the book club, if I was going somewhere and she would be in the yard, I would stop and talk. And the same with she was going somewhere, she would do the same.
Okay. How often would you say that you saw her in the fall of 1998?
Probably once a week or so, not real frequently in the fall.
Okay. And during this once a week that you would see her in the fall, would you speak to her also?
Oh, yes.
And how would you describe Mrs. Jensen's personality?
She was a very warm, caring person, outgoing, nice to be around. She was a very nice neighbor.
Okay. And did you observe her interactions with her children?
Whenever I saw her, she was an excellent mother. The children were everything to her.
Okay. Did you see Mrs. Jensen at the November book club?
Yes.
And do you recall Mrs. Jensen's physical appearance at the November book club?
She looked the same as she always did to me.
Okay. And did she behave as she always behaved?
Yes, she did.
And how did she behave at that book club?
Well, Julie was always an excellent hostess, and she's very warm. She greeted us. She, if I'm not mistaken, that night we had a buffet set up in her home, and she just was a very good hostess.
Did you speak with Mrs. Jensen during the week of her death?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall when that was?
I believe it was Monday before her death.
Okay. That would have been November 30th?
Yes, I know it was after Thanksgiving.
Okay. And how is it that did you speak to her in person or over the phone?
No, she called me.
And why did she call you?
In the spring of 1998, I had started a lot of plants in my basement from seeds and grew them under lights, and I gave a lot of the surplus to Julie. And at the time, she was very interested in that, and so she wanted to know, when she called me, she wanted to know when I got the seeds, when I started them. And seeds are not available that early, so I told her that I bought them through a seed catalog. And she wanted to get a catalog, and I said, well, I would bring mine over when I got it. And they came out around Christmas time. And then she asked me about lights and about what I started the seeds in. It was just strictly a talk about gardening.
How long would you say the conversation lasted?
Maybe 20, 25 minutes.
Okay.
It
And
was
so,
quite long, really.
okay. And Mrs. Jensen, she was making plans for her garden.
Yes.
Do you recall the day that Mrs. Jensen died?
Yes.
And did you have an opportunity to speak with Mr. Jensen that day?
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell me what you saw and what happened?
I had been in Milwaukee and came home, and as I drove around the corner, there were all these emergency vehicles parked by their house and in the drive. And I went home, parked my car, and I walked back to the Ashley's driveway, which is across the street from the Jensen's home. And some of the other neighbors were there. And we were standing there wondering what had happened because of the two young boys. We thought perhaps something had happened to one of them. Then finally, Mark and his father walked across the street to where we were. And we said, well, what happened? And he said, Julie had died and that she had had a bad reaction to some medicine she had taken. And I said, well, how come they couldn't get her to the hospital or call the emergency squad? And he just sort of said, well, they couldn't. And after a few other questions from the other people standing there, he and his father turned around and walked back across the street.
So you said he said that she had a bad reaction. Mm-hmm. Who's the he?
Pardon?
Who's the he? Who said that?
Mark. Mark said that. His father didn't say anything.
Okay. Who was it who responded to your question, couldn't she have gotten to the hospital?
Mark.
Okay. And what was Mr. Jensen's demeanor when you posed this question and then he answered?
I think he was very cool. And at the time, after I got home, I thought, well, he was in shock. But then as I thought about it later, I thought, well, maybe not.
Okay. Now, did you attend Mrs. Jensen's funeral?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall what day of the week this was?
It was on a Monday.
Okay. And did you have an opportunity to interact or observe Mr. Jensen at the funeral?
I just said I was very sorry that Julie had died, or the usual sort of thing. That was about it.
Okay. And how did Mr. Jensen appear?
To me, he was fine at that moment.
Fine by what? What do you mean by fine?
I just said, he just said, well, thank you, or something of that nature. But then I went and sat down, and I could still see him because he was standing in the doorway between the hallway and the funeral room, and he seemed to be greeting other people and rather, well, I just thought he would have been much more serious and sad than he was.
Okay. Now, was the Monday following Mrs. Jensen's funeral garbage day in your neighborhood?
Yes.
And do you recall observing anything outside of the Jensen home the Monday?
Yes, there was a large pile of Julie's clothes and things.
And did you personally observe this?
Yes.
And how did you know that they were Julie's things outside for the garbage?
May I have some water?
Yes.
By all means.
I'll show you.
There's a pump.
I've poured these all over myself several times, so I know how to do it. So
Oh, you have to loosen it.
that's what
Oh,
you
okay.
got.
That's fine.
There you go.
Thank you. The clothes were all piled on the very end of his driveway. And since Julie was the only woman in the house, I suppose I assumed they were her clothes.
It appeared to be women's clothing?
They were women's clothing.
Okay. I have nothing further.
What is that? I'm just a little unclear. What exactly did you observe at the curb?
There were piles of her clothing. There were dresses, there were bags of clothes, there were shoes, purses.
But there were lots of clothes and bags and purses and shoes
Right,
that were all outside.
right. They were all at the very end of her driveway between the road goes by and the driveway at the end of that.
Okay. Just so I can finish my question. Those are all things you saw outside of bags.
Yes.
When you saw Mark Jensen after his wife passed away, you thought that he might be in shock, right?
Yes.
You're aware that different people react differently to tragic events, right?
Of course.
And do you recall Mr. Jensen's father kind of pulling him away from the crowd?
No.
You can understand how somebody in Mark's position, somebody whose wife has just passed away, might not want to answer a whole lot of questions from neighbors.
I can understand that, yes.
When you spoke with Mrs. Jensen on Monday, November 30th, did she tell you that she had called the doctor that day and made an appointment?
No.
Did she tell you that she was going to see the doctor the following day for
No.
depression?
No, she did not.
Did she ever talk to you about depression?
No.
Did she talk to you about personal things?
No.
So she would never have talked to you about an affair she had?
No.
Ms. Passetti, was it the wake you saw Mark Jensen at?
Pardon?
Was it the wake you saw Mark Jensen at, as opposed to the funeral? Was it a wake or a funeral that you went to?
I went to the funeral.
Okay. And that was Monday?
I believe so.
You don't know how much time Mark Jensen had been spending privately with his family, grieving, right?
Do I know how much time he spent with his family grieving?
Right.
No, of course not.
You don't know whether he had spent a lot of time with his pastor up to that point, right?
No, I do not.
Passetti, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Read back.
All right, so that is State's Exhibit 18, and the state would move that at this time.
18 will be received.
See how short they were?
Are we done with the videos? All right. Let's take our Friday afternoon break, folks. Courtroom, what do you wish to say, Mr. Jamboys?
Well, Your Honor, the next witness is going to be Aaron Dillard, and
Do we have a number of prior convictions that we have agreed to?
I don't know that we agreed to them. I can list them. The thing is, I don't know. I've never tried a case in front of you, Judge, so I don't know what your rule is about counting.
10 years, we use the federal rule?
10 years?
Yes.
Judge, 10 years in this case is complicated because Mr. Dillard's testimony that he's sort of locked into was in 2008 and testified. And so there's all the impeachment of him relevant to that timeliness.
So how many convictions did he have when he testified in 2008?
I think the answer at that time was 7 in this country and 5 in Lithuania. And he since has more convictions, and he has pending cases that...
We're not going to get into pending cases because they're not convictions.
Well,
if you read the statute.
yeah, we have to, because it's part of the current deal that he's facing in terms
That's
of...
a different issue.
Yeah, right. We're not going to count those as convictions.
Right.
I agree. So I think the standard sort of 10 years from today can't apply in this case because of...
Well, let me ask you this. How many did Judge Schrader say or agree to on the record in 2007?
I believe it was
2008.
I'm sorry,
I
2008.
believe it was 7. Plus 7 in this country.
So that's how he worded it.
Yeah. And then
well, Your Honor, I've
also
got...
talked about having 5 separate victims of immigration visa fraud in Lithuania. That's all relevant here. And so I don't know if that counts as 5 or 1. I don't really care. He subsequently to... Well, and then we should just make sure our math is correct in terms of subsequent convictions.
Well, Your Honor, why don't we do this? I've got it written out here. I should say Carly McNeil had sent them an email with this information on it.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jim, but they were talking about that Mr. Dillard's here, and I'm trying to figure out where to put him.
So where did you decide to put him?
He's still outside. He's not in the back.
Okay.
I want the record to be clear on that.
Sure. Well, Your Honor, I'll just indicate that we sent this communication to Defense Counsel, and for Aaron Dillard, we listed 1 immigration visa fraud conviction in Lithuania. We don't know what year that was. I guess it was...
I think it was 2000.
Could
Well, that's
be.
when he was extradited from the U.S. to Lithuania.
So anyway, he was convicted in Lithuania of immigration visa fraud. Then in La Crosse County 95 CF 1836, he was convicted of misdemeanor issuing worthless check. He was convicted of that offense on March 15th, 1996. Then his next conviction would have been May 20th, 2002. He was convicted of obstructing an officer in Racine County, case number 99 CM 2299. Then in 00 CF 1181, he was convicted on March 27th, 2003 of 1 count of forgery. Then in 01 CM 86, it doesn't say which county here, but in 01 CM 86, he was convicted on March 27, 2003 of issuing a worthless check. Then, and again, there's no county list here, but on March 27, 2003, he was convicted of felony bail jumping in 02 CF 959. Then in Racine County 02 CF 1286, he was convicted on August 26, 2003 of 1 count of forgery. Then in 05 CF 637, he was convicted on December 16, 2005 of 1 count of fraudulent use of a credit card as a repeat offender. Then in Racine County, case number 07 CF 81, he was convicted 9908 of 1 count of theft by contractor. Then in Waukesha County, case number 07 CM 1446, he was convicted February 25, 2008 of obstructing an officer. Then in Milwaukee County, case number 11 CF 5340, he was convicted March 7, 2012 of misappropriating an identification information. Then in Waukesha County case number 13 CF 450, he was convicted July 24, 2014 of 1 count of burglary. And he was released on extended supervision, and his extended supervision was revoked, and he's presently 9 months into a 15-month term he's serving on that period of revocation. Now he has 3 pending cases. 20 CF 739, where he's charged with 2 counts of fraud against a financial institution. 22 CF 1288, also Waukesha, where he's charged with burglary as a repeater, and 22 CM 1596, where he's charged with resisting or obstructing an officer. Now, with respect to those pending cases, he has an attorney, and his attorney knows that he's here. I don't think he's expecting that Mr. Diller will be asked questions about those pending cases. So the question is, what should be counted? And you're the judge and you make the call. I don't think it's true that he's wedded to his testimony from 2008. I think his testimony from 2008 is prior testimony and it's hearsay, and it only becomes admissible if he's cross-examined on it and it's a prior inconsistent statement. Otherwise, it's hearsay. So I think we should be looking at his testimony here today. And if he testifies truthfully, and if I can refresh his recollection, if need be, by his prior statements, for example, he wrote a letter to his lawyer back in 2007 about this case and about what he wanted. And I also think that it's reasonable to ask him questions about what kind of a benefit he received in 2008, because he did receive a benefit in 2008 when he testified. He was required to testify truthfully, but he was in prison at the time that he made this statement, and he was released from prison by the time he testified. And he was released from prison as part of a plea agreement that we entered into, that we granted him release from prison if he testified truthfully in this particular case. I think he got an early release or something. So he was released from prison. He walked through the front door instead of walking through the back door in cuffs because of what he said in 2008. This time around, the offer is simply, he doesn't get an offer. I mean, he's already serving a prison term. He's not getting out of the prison term that he's presently serving. The only thing that the state has indicated is once he's done testifying, if he's testified truthfully, we're going to write a letter to the prosecutor and the defense attorney in his present cases and explain that he testified truthfully. On the other hand, if he testifies untruthfully, we're going to write a letter indicating he testified untruthfully. But neither Ms. O'Neill nor I are going to be asking for any consideration on his behalf. He's required to testify because he's subpoenaed, and he's got to be here, and he's got to testify truthfully.
But I think the defense has a right to ask him if he testifies today that he would get this letter from the prosecution that he testified truthfully to the judge. I mean, I think that is allowable.
I agree with that. That's the only thing that we've offered him. Yeah. So then the question is, what about all this other stuff?
Well, here's my thought. If we go to impeachment and he doesn't testify the same way that he did in 2008, I think we should bring up the prior number of convictions that he had at that time. So the jury understands. Let me just finish, and then I'll let you talk, okay?
Okay.
So,
as long as it's just your thoughts at the moment.
It is. I like that statement. I really do. It helps me make a decision. Now, we got to come up with a number since 2008, because now he's testifying in 2023, and again, I'll allow a question as to the pending cases if he's getting any consideration. So can we come up with a number after the last, I would call Jensen 1?
Well, Your Honor, he was convicted in Racine County case number 07 CF 81 on September 9th, 2008, which was after he testified in the last case. And then he was convicted in Waukesha County case number 07 CM 1446. He was convicted on February 25th, 2008, which was right about the time he testified in the last case. It was almost exactly at this. I mean, I don't know how he must have gotten out and gone right back over there. I mean, these are the conviction dates, so I don't know what the offense dates were. And then he was convicted in 11 CF 5340 on March 7, 2012 of misappropriation of identification. So that would be 3 convictions since 2000.
Since the last trial.
Since the last trial.
And then he's got the 3 open cases, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then so Jensen 1, he had 7 prior convictions, plus the immigration issues in Lithuania, correct?
Correct.
All right. So what did you want to say now, Mr. Perry?
His credibility, when he came up with this story, is key to Mr. Jensen's defense. Okay? Because when he goes to the jail in 2007 and then writes up this story, which he sells to the prosecutors, his credibility when he did that is absolutely relevant. And his credibility when he came up with that includes those convictions that preceded the 2007 statement. And the deal he got for his testimony in 2008, we can't be limited to only if he changes his story now, because the deal that he got for selling his story to the prosecutor in 2007, 2008 is critical to explain why he came up with this story. I mean, he acknowledges this was like his opportunity, and I'm only going to do this if I can get out of jail. And so it cannot be limited to whatever has happened after his testimony and only the current deal of, it so happens it's the gift that keeps on giving for him, because he always has pending charges, and he's got pending charges now. Now, when Mr. Jamboy says that there's really no deal now, that was the same deal that they offered him. He had 3 things going on in 2008. He had a pending theft by contractor charge. He had an ES revocation or reconfinement issue where he was, the recommendation from the agent was 4.5 years, and the recommendation for the theft by contractor was to get 0 time. The recommendation for the ES reconfinement was to get the agent to change the recommendation from 4.5 years to 0 or to time served. And then he had a pending Waukesha obstructing case, and the deal for that was we'll write a letter telling people whether or not you testified truthfully, which is the same offer right now. And as a result, he got a fine only in that Waukesha case. And his knowledge of that, and his knowledge also that that can be the benefit from a letter just detailing his cooperation, is also key to explaining his motive, his understanding, his reasons for lying today. And so all of the impeachment that existed as of 2007, 2008, because his credibility at that time is absolutely relevant right now, because that's when he drafted this letter to his lawyer. It's when he sat down and just explained his whole story to the prosecutors in October of 2007, and it's what he testified to in 2008. And so his credibility to judge that is completely as relevant today as it was then. And that's why this sort of counting rule has to be different right now.
I'll let the state respond, but what is your suggestion then as to what I should say, what is your suggestion that we tell Mr. Dillard before he testifies, because he has to know what he's going to say as to prior convictions?
Sure, and in terms of the number, I mean, the number is one thing. There's going to be a tremendous amount of details in terms of 90608 sub 2 evidence, okay, just like at the last time. And the state, and I'll answer your question, but the state, even in its opening statement, said, who Aaron Dillard is. He's a liar. He's a con man. Everyone acknowledges he's a liar. He's not an inherently believable witness. He's the opposite, right? So it's all on the table. I suggest, I don't really care about the 1995 lacrosse conviction, and that was probably dated even at the time of 2007. So I think everything after that is fair game. The Lithuania stuff, so I think the answer is 1. If we count Lithuania as 1, even though it's, you know, a little grab bag of massive fraud cases.
You know anything about the Lithuanian legal system?
Well, I know that he got extradited from the U.S. to go to prison there for that.
They used to be part of Russia. They had a jury trial system where you got shot if you got convicted. So.
Well, Mr. Dillard got convicted, but he didn't get shot. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 is what I think the answer should be for how many convictions do you have. And I think everything in terms of the deal he got in 2008 has got to be allowed right now for the reasons I stated.
So you said 11?
I said 11.
All right. And the jury should hear about the deal in 2008 and if there's any deal today, correct?
That's right.
Is that all right? Who wants to respond?
Well, this is going to be my witness, Your Honor, so I'll respond.
Go ahead.
First of all, let's talk about the thing in Lithuania. He went back to Lithuania, he was convicted, and then he was released and sent back here again. He didn't serve any more time in Lithuania. I think he got a time-served sentence and was sent back to the United States. Maybe the Lithuanians have improved their judicial system by that time over what it was under Russia. But and that was some time around 2004, which is 19 years ago. Now, how we count convictions is a separate thing from the discussion of whatever he received for testifying in 2008 and whatever he's being offered to testify this time. We don't need to offer him anything to testify this time. He's subpoenaed and he's here and he's required to testify. He doesn't have any choice in the matter. And so it should stand to reason the prosecutors are going to write a letter. And I don't have any problem with asking him, isn't it true that you've got 3 pending cases in Waukesha County, and the prosecutor, the special prosecutor, has indicated he's going to write a letter to your defense attorney and to the prosecutor indicating whether or not you testified truthfully in this case. But we made it clear to Mr. Dillard, we are not going to be making any recommendation for leniency or anything like that. So if I have no problem with him being informed of that. In terms of him testifying in 2008, that's really not relevant unless there's something that he testifies about inconsistently here with what he testified about concerning this incident in 2008. He's here to testify. He's got to testify truthfully. And if he testifies in an untruthful manner, he could be charged with perjury. If he chooses to perjure himself, he could be subject to the same sanctions that the other witness would be subject to. So in terms of the convictions that should be counted, I would encourage the court to adhere to your normal standard, which is go back 10 years. And if you go back 10 years, you would be counting actually 10 years back would be 2013. So you would actually be counting from 2013. He's only got 1 prior conviction because on March 7, 2012, he was convicted in Milwaukee County case 11 CF 5340 of misappropriation. 11 CF 5340. He was convicted on March 7, 2012, which is 11 years ago, almost 11 years ago. But if you want to, if you wanted to go to that one, then that would be 2. If you go back to the last conviction he had since the trial, that would be February 25th, 2008, and that would be 3. But in order to go beyond 3, you'd be throwing the standard that you've adhered to since you've been a judge right out the window and just applying a completely new standard for Mr. Dillard. So I would encourage the court to do this. I would encourage you split the 2 things here. Let's first of all decide what we're going to say about what consideration he received this time or what consideration he received last time. And then we also look at the number of convictions that the court's going to count. And I think you should count 2, or at most 3.
Judge, the testimony in 2008, he can only be impeached with that if he gives an inconsistent statement. I agree to that. That's not the the problem, though. The problem is the motive he had for selling his story, what he sold his story for in 2008, what he sold the story for, period. And that was the benefit that he got in 2008 and the deal he got and his understanding of the deal now. And his credibility in 2008 is his credibility when he wrote a letter and said, guess what I learned? As far as his 3 pending cases, I'm not suggesting that that those can be counted as convictions. I don't even care if he acknowledged, I'm not suggesting he needs to acknowledge his guilt in those cases, but it can't be limited in terms of motive to just, you have 3 pending cases and the state is agreeing to write a letter to you. It's, you have 3 pending cases and they're alleging X, Y, Z, and this is what you're facing in them. This is how much is on the table and hanging over you as you come here and testify. Now, the state subpoenaed Aaron Dillard in 2008, and he had to honor that subpoena, just like today. So I don't really understand that argument, that he had to honor his subpoena. Everyone has to, regardless of whether or not they are getting some tremendous benefit.
Well, I'm ready to make a decision. The 90609 says general rule. The facts of this witness, it's not a general rule issue. It'd probably be a great law school question for a final exam. That's how difficult it is. The problem that I have, obviously, the state has already said, this guy's a liar. I mean, that's already out of the bag. And I think the defense, I don't know what Mr. Dillard's going to say, but it sounds like he's going to tell the jury something that Mr. Jensen said while he was in custody. And that testimony could be pretty damaging against the defendant. So we got the issue of 2008 when he testified and he got this deal and it worked out for him. And now we're back again in 2023 and I think there's a strong possibility that he's going to do it again. He says, wait a minute, I got this deal in 2008. I might get this deal now in 2023. So, when I started talking, I said only for impeachment purposes. The more I think about this, and I've said this previously in this case, to be on the safe side, and the attorneys know what I mean. You might not agree with my decision, but I'm the one that's on the decision when it's overturned, not you guys. And they'll spell my name correctly, trust me. And this is a homicide case. I've been informed of that also. So, you're going to tell Mr. Dillard, Mr. Jamboy, he has 11 prior convictions. The defense is going to be allowed to talk about the deal in 2008, and the defense can ask questions about whatever they think if there's a deal in 2023. So, with that, I'm trying to figure out where you want to talk to Mr. Dillard because I don't want to put him in the back by the jury. You want to just bring him in here?
Let's bring him in here. Let's do it right here.
Okay, is he out there? Bring him in and we'll take our break, okay? All right? Thank you.
Take our break now?
Yeah.
At what time should we all be here?
How much time do you need to talk to Mr. Dillard?
Just a few minutes.
All right, then we'll take a 10-minute break. Thank you. We're going to start without Carly. It's okay. Bring it. All right, we're back on the record on Mark D. Jensen, 2002 CF 314. Mr. Jamboys appears for the state. The defense appears with Mr. Jensen. The next witness for the state is Aaron Dillard. That's number 14 on the witness list. I'd ask Mr. Dillard to stand and raise his right hand, and I'm going to swear you in. You solemnly swear the testimony in this matter be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, the witness raised his hand, is sworn in. Aaron Dillard is spelled A-A-R-O-N. Dillard is D-I-L-L-A-R-D. Try to get as close as you can to that microphone, Mr. Dillard. With that, Mr. Jamboys, you can start.
So, Mr. Dillard, you're wearing prison clothes, is that correct?
That's correct.
So you're an inmate right now?
Yes, I am.
And what kind of a term are you serving right now?
15 months for revocation.
And so you're revoked on a matter, and you got 15 months?
That is correct.
And you've served 6 months of that?
Yes, I have.
So you've got 9 months left to serve?
Correct.
And you testified previously in this matter back in 2008, is that correct?
That is correct.
And when you testified that time, you're testifying this time, you're going to be testifying about a conversation that you had with somebody while you were in the county jail. Is that true?
That's correct.
Who was the person that you had the conversation with?
Mark Jensen.
Do you see Mark Jensen anywhere in this courtroom today, and could you point to him?
Yeah, he's sitting over there.
I'd request the record show the witness identified the defendant.
The witness identified Mr. Jensen in open court.
Now, what days, when was it that you were incarcerated at the same location as Mark Jensen?
August 14th through the 17th of 2007.
And where were you incarcerated at that time?
Kenosha County Jail.
And what happened on August 17th?
I was returned back to prison.
Okay, and so you were in prison after this conversation with Mark Jensen?
That is correct.
But by the time that you testified at the trial, at the previous hearing in 2008, you were out of custody. Is that true?
That's correct.
And part of the reason, in fact, the reason you're out of custody is because you'd entered into an agreement with the state. Isn't that true?
That's true.
And the agreement was that if you would come in and testify truthfully about the conversation that you had with Mark Jensen, that you would be released from prison at that point.
That's correct.
And there were some other benefits you also had, that the state would write a letter on your behalf in another case that you had pending in a different county?
Yes.
And the state complied with all of its terms of its agreement?
Yes,
Judge,
it did.
I'm just going to object to if this is all going to be leading, because so far it has been.
Well, you're going to cross on the area too, so I mean, it's not a surprise for either side where we're going to go.
Sure, I'm not surprised. I just want it to be Mr. Dillard's answers.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Jamboys.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Dillard, could you move the microphone a little bit closer, because the jury needs to be able to hear what you're saying?
Okay. Is this better?
That is better. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Now, tell us about how you first met Mark Jensen.
I met Mark Jensen when I first got transferred from prison to Kenosha County Jail for a sentencing hearing.
So, and what date was that?
That was the 14th of August.
And what time of the day was it that you first saw or met Mark Jensen?
Around 6 p.m.
And what happened around 6 p.m.? Where did you see Mark Jensen at 6 p.m.?
In cell block I in Kenosha County Jail.
Describe cell block I. Is there more than one cell in cell block I?
I believe there's 6 cells. It's about a day room about 12 feet wide by about 20 feet long, and then the cells are lined up along that.
And are these one-person cells or multiple-person cells?
Number 1 and 6 are one-man cells, and then 2, 3, and 4, and 5 are two-man cells.
And was Mr. Jensen a one-man cell or a two-person cell?
From what I remember, he was in a 2-person cell.
And do you know who his cellmate was?
No, I don't.
But you were not his cellmate.
No, that's correct.
So what were your first observations of Mr. Jensen when you first saw him at 6 p.m. on August 14th, 2007?
Well, I mean, the first conversation I had with him was like, you're the popular guy around here, you know, so we were just introducing ourselves. Everybody was getting to know each other. When you come into a pod, everybody wants to know who you are, and so Mark came out of his cell and introduced himself, and we started talking from there.
And you're the one who told him that he was a popular guy around here?
Yeah, when he came out, I said, you're quite the popular guy around here.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, I had read a newspaper article about him.
Okay, so you know what he was in for?
Yes.
And he'd been charged with the murder of his wife?
Yes.
And so after you'd had that conversation with him, did you talk to him at all anymore that evening?
Yeah, we did. We talked about the Edward Klug transcript and that he had his bond revoked because he came out of the woodworks and 9 years later said that he wanted to kill his wife while at a conference.
That Mark Jensen had said that to Ed Klug?
Yeah, that Ed Klug had testified to that he came out of the woodwork and said that.
So when Mark Jensen was talking to you about that, what did he say about that?
He said it was bullshit.
He was said that Ed Klug was lying?
Yeah, he said Ed Klug was lying.
And how long did you and Mark Jensen talk about this?
That day we talked probably 2 hours. He had given me the transcripts to read from that testimony of Klug.
He gave you the transcript of Ed Klug's testimony from the forfeiture hearing?
Yes.
And he gave that to you to read?
Yes.
So did you read it?
Yes, I did.
Where was Mr. Jensen while you were reading it?
In the day room.
So was he talking with you while you were reading it, or was he just letting you read it?
I actually took it to my cell and read it, and then came back out when I was done.
How much time did you spend reading it?
A good hour.
And after you read it, you gave it back to Mr. Jensen?
Yes, I did.
And did you and he have another conversation at that time?
Yeah, we did. It was getting pretty close to lockdown, but we had talked about it, and he said, yeah, I told him it was kind of crazy that he come out of the woodworks and said this, and I said he's okay if his secretaries didn't testify to corroborate Edward Klug's testimony saying that he said this to them.
So did you have any further conversation with Mark Jensen that evening?
No, pretty much not.
So that evening, Mark Jensen, when the last conversation you had with him before you went back to your cell to sleep for the evening, what was Mark Jensen's position with respect to what Ed Klug had testified about?
That he was lying.
So then, when's the next time that you talked to Mark Jensen?
The next day at around 10 in the morning.
And where did you see Mr. Jensen at 10 in the morning?
In the day room.
And where did you see him in the day room?
I saw him sitting, we were sitting at the tables, and then we ended up going in the back of the day room and sitting by the heater.
Just you and he?
Yeah, just him and I at that time.
And did he have any paperwork with him?
No.
So when you saw him and you sat in the back of the day room at around 10 o'clock in the morning, what did you and he talk about?
We talked about the transcripts from Edward Klug's testimony.
And how long did you sit there talking with him about Ed Klug's testimony?
I'd say a good hour.
And what did Mr. Jensen say to you at that time about Ed Klug's testimony?
He said that Edward Klug was an attention getter and that he was lying and that he was full of shit and things like that.
And how did you respond to that?
I said, well, why would he make it up? And
did Mr. Jensen have an answer for that?
No, he didn't. He just said he did. He was lying.
And so how long did you continue to talk with Mr. Jensen that morning?
We had lunch right after that at 11 o'clock-ish. So then after lunch, we came out and we started talking some more. And we were talking about another inmate named JJ. I don't know his full name, but he was a younger kid that was kind of extorting him and taking money from him.
Okay, so let's back up and talk about lunch. You said you had lunch at 11 o'clock?
Yes.
So it's not like you go out to Burger King or something when you're in jail. What did you do for lunch?
No, they bring lunch to the day room.
And so where do you eat your lunch?
Right in the day room or in your cell.
And where did you eat your lunch?
In my cell.
And did you see where Mr. Jensen ate his lunch?
I would believe it would be the day room.
But you ate your lunch alone in your cell?
Yeah.
And how long were you in the cell alone for?
I'd say 20 minutes.
And then what happened?
Then I started talking back with Mark again.
Had he finished his lunch by that time?
Yeah, when he finished his lunch, yeah.
So about what time was it that you started talking with Mr. Jensen again?
It's safe to say 11:30.
And how long did you talk after 11:30 with Mr. Jensen?
Well, off and on, we spoke a lot throughout the day, so I would say another 4 hours throughout the day, 5 hours throughout the day.
So that first conversation, the first conversation with you that you had with him after 11:30, where was that? Where were you located when you had that conversation with him?
In the day room.
Where in the day room? Do you remember?
At the tables.
And were there other inmates around?
Yeah.
Were they within hearing distance?
Yes.
So what did you and Mark Jensen talk about at 11:30 onward?
We talked about the Edward Klug transcript. We talked about how he said that Edward Klug he was lying, he was full of shit. We talked about that, like I said, that younger inmate that was there, JJ, that he was kind of bullying him, taking his canteen, making him put money on his books, things like that. And then we started talking about, it was just, we talked about common people we knew.
You talked about people that you both knew?
Yeah, he was in the construction business, and I had some construction interests as well.
Okay, so there were some people that you knew together?
Yes.
And so after you started talking about the people that you knew in common from the construction industry, how did the conversation progress after that?
It went into trying to find. He was asking, well, he was giving me his defenses in the trial, how he was going to prove his innocence and things like that.
So can you tell us some things he said to you?
Yeah, he said that he was laughing at your proposal for the Benadryl and the antifreeze being mixed together, and it would take him 4 ounces or 8 ounces of Benadryl and to get that much antifreeze in her. So he said that was crazy that you even brought that up. He said that that you guys lost all the toxicology reports, and that he was going to try to. Well, I told him he should argue that. He should argue the fact that if they lost the toxicology reports, you should ask to be able to test them yourself. And so we talked about that as a defense. He said that there were pictures of antifreeze in the house that you guys had mistakenly not seen, and he was going to use that as a defense. That's pretty much what I remember for the most part.
And when he was telling you about these defenses, were you saying anything in response?
I said they're good ideas. I said, but still said that if it comes to Edward Klug's testimony, you're going to be screwed regardless.
And how did he respond to that?
He told them to bring it on. That was kind of his big statement, was for you guys to bring it on.
Those are the words he used, bring it on?
Bring it on.
And so how long did the conversation continue after you'd exchanged these ideas?
Probably for a few hours total, just talking about it all.
Now, at some point, did he start to change his tune with respect to Edward Klug's testimony?
That would be on the 16th.
So still on the 15th, he hadn't changed his story with respect to Ed Klug?
Yeah, he was still in the negative. He was still saying that he was innocent, that it was all bullshit and things like that.
Okay, and that was his position all the way through the 16th?
Yes, all the way through the 15th.
I'm sorry, all the way through the 15th.
Yeah.
So, and how long did you talk to him for the rest of the 15th?
Probably until about 8 at night, 9 at night.
Now, on the 15th, did you see any documents that he had with him?
No.
You didn't read anything at all on the 15th? You didn't read anything at all on the 15th?
Yeah, just he brought out the Edward Klug testimony again because he was showing me the parts where he was an attention seeker and showing me parts of the testimony. So he did bring that back out during the day, but as far as anything else, no.
So you did again see Ed Klug's testimony from the forfeiture hearing, but you didn't see anything else?
Correct.
And what time did you stop talking with Mark Jensen on the 15th?
About 8, 9 o'clock at night.
And then you went back to your cell and he went back to his cell?
Yeah, it was locked down.
So when's the next time that you saw Edward Klug?
On the 16th, about 10 in the morning again.
I'm sorry, I said Edward Klug. I mean, when's the next time you saw Mark Jensen?
Sorry, on the 16th, probably about 10 in the morning again.
And tell us about what happened on the 16th.
On the 16th, we were talking, and he started telling me about how that Julie was jumping up and down on the bed and making all kinds of noise, and he had to show her on the internet about the Paxil side effects. And
Okay, and so after he made that statement, what happened next?
well, we were talking, and he was kind of chuckling about her laughing, or about her jumping up and down on the bed. And then it turned into more like me pushing the whole thing about saying, I think you did it, you know? I question him more on that.
Well, what did you actually think he did it? I mean, what caused you to change your tactic and say, I thought you did it?
Well, I thought he did it when he started mentioning about Edward Klug and him saying that he wanted to kill his wife, and then he was talking about his kids wanting to call the ambulance and stuff like that, and he didn't call them.
So tell me, when did he first mention the kids wanting him to call an ambulance?
When we were talking about her jumping on the bed, and the next day.
So that was on the 16th that he mentioned that the children wanted to call the ambulance?
Yes.
And what time of the day was this that he started making those statements?
This was earlier in the morning, like around 10-ish.
Okay, so when you first started talking to him at 10 in the morning on August 16th is when he started mentioning that his children had wanted him to take their mother to the hospital?
Yeah, they were worried about her.
He told you that?
Yeah.
What else did he tell you about the children or about what was going on at that point?
Well, we were talking about the kids quite a bit because he was telling me about how Julie used to keep, she would punish them a lot and things like that. So this is where we started talking about the kids more. And he would say that Julie put one of the kids in one room naked, and that he would put the other kid in another room naked and make them stand there, and that when they were on vacation, she would yell at him at the restaurant and make a big scene and things like that. So.
And do you know what his point was in telling this? Did he tell you why he was telling you about this?
I don't know. If you want my opinion was that he was just kind of.
I don't think anyone asked for his opinion.
I would sustain that.
So, well, did you discern any reason for him to be telling you these things about Julie?
No, I didn't understand why he was telling me that way.
But he was bad-mouthing Julie at that
Yes.
point. And so after he'd been bad-mouthing Julie for a while and then telling you that the children were concerned about her and they wanted him to call an ambulance, what happened next then?
Well, at that point, I had told Mark that we all did what we did to get here, and, you know, that if you want to find a way around it, you got to tell the truth. And then he said, well, yeah, we all did do what we did to get here, and he started breaking down. He said, I really screwed up when I told Edward Klug that I wanted to kill my wife.
So he did acknowledge at that point that he told Edward Klug that I wanted to kill my wife.
On the 16th, he did.
And what else did he tell you about that conversation with Edward Klug?
He had told me that he poisoned her, or tried to attempt to poison her, on that first day when he was in St. Louis with Edward Klug on that trip, and that she had thrown up all over the house, and he had to come home and take care of it.
Did he indicate anything about anything else about that incident where he said he tried to poison her and before he went on that conference?
He said, from what I recall, he said that he felt he was bad-mouthing him he got drunk, and that he was bad-mouthing Julie to Ed, and he screwed up when he said that he poisoned her when he was on that trip, and he's glad she didn't die then, or else he would have been really screwed.
Okay, he said I didn't hear that last part.
He said he screwed up. He would have been really screwed if she didn't die if she did die when he was on that trip.
Did he say why he'd be really screwed if she
Because he mentioned it to Klug that he wanted to kill his wife.
So after he told you that he had tried to poison her and that he had also disclosed to Ed Klug that he wanted to kill his wife, Did he ultimately tell you that he did, in fact, kill his wife?
Yes.
Tell us about that. Tell me how this conversation went when he was talking to you about this St. Louis, this conference that you'd gone to.
Well, he told me about it, and then we just kept blending into what he had said he did. During that time, there's another inmate, Dion Hardison, and I was trying to get to have him listen to it because I thought he was crazy telling me everything that he was doing. So I tried to get Dion to listen, but he wouldn't talk when Dion was around. So when Dion left, he would continue talking to me, and then he had told me about how he would have her buy all his medications and things like that, so it showed that she was doing it, and he was kind of trying to make it look like she was trying to commit suicide.
What else did he tell you about this? Besides what you've just described, did he tell you anything else about this?
Yes, he told me that he actually they went to the doctor and got her put on Paxil, and that day when they came home, he gave her the Paxil. He gave her Librium and Benadryl and I think St. John's wort, and he said that evening she was feeling loopy and all that, and then he gave her antifreeze, or gave her juice with antifreeze in it.
And did he tell her when he first gave her a juice with antifreeze?
The first night they had Paxil, so whenever that was.
And after he gave her the Paxil and the juice with the antifreeze, what happened next? Did he tell you?
Yeah, that evening she was jumping around on the bed, acting drunk, and then they went to the computer to check the side effects of Paxil.
And did he tell you what happened next then?
Yeah, they basically went back to bed, and he went to the doctor the next day and got her a prescription of Ambien for her.
Did he tell you why he went to get the prescription for Ambien?
Yeah, so she would sleep better through this situation.
Through him poisoning her?
Yes.
Did he tell you what happened after he got the Ambien?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Did he tell you what happened after he got the Ambien?
Yeah, he gave her the Ambien. He gave her more juice with antifreeze in it, and she was sleeping, and then she started throwing up a little bit. And then this is the next day. So that night, the kids were sitting with her watching TV, and they were just kind of having a family thing, and he had the kids with her.
That was that evening?
Yeah.
Did he tell you what happened then after that, after the children had been watching TV with her?
Well, then the night ended, and then it started the next day. He said that she was breathing really raspy in the morning, and that she was breathing bad, and she wasn't moving around at all. And that the kids actually wanted to call the ambulance right then, and he said that he calmed them down and tried to get them to just, well, if she's not feeling better, when you get home from school, we'll call an ambulance for her.
So that's what he told the children?
Yeah, that's what he told the children. And
Did he tell you what happened then after he told that to the children?
Yeah, he took them to school, and then he had to do something with a client, some check or something like that he had to pick up, and then he went back home, and Julie was breathing better. And at that point, he rolled her over, and then...
Did he tell you why he rolled her over?
Just to see, how she would breathe and things like that.
And did he tell you what happened next after that?
Yeah, at that point he had her on her side. Then he rolled her on her stomach, and he was seeing how she was doing then, and she wasn't breathing she was breathing the same. She wasn't breathing any worse. So at that point he felt nervous and figured he had to do something on his own, and he sat on her back and then pressed her face into the pillow.
So, at some point, you you communicated this information to your attorney.
Yes.
And you remember what your attorney's name was?
Gretchen Rosenke.
Now, how did you communicate it to Gretchen Rosenke?
I wrote a letter.
At the time you wrote the letter, was this matter much fresher in your mind at that time?
Yes.
I mean, you wrote it right after you'd had this conversation.
Yes.
Now, in the letter that you wrote to your attorney, you were asking her to reach out to the DA to get you a deal on your case, weren't you?
Yes.
So, when you were talking to Mark Jensen, at what point was it that you decided you were going to try to use this information to get a deal on your case?
At the point when he started, like, kind of bringing the kids into it, I felt that was horrible. That really kind of struck me wrong.
So you decided at that point that you were going to try to get him to give you... Now, when he talked about bringing the kids into it, by that time, had he confessed to you that he'd murdered Julie or not?
No, he was... At that point, he didn't, but it was just the whole thing, him saying Julie punished him and put him in corners naked and all this. He was talking about the kids and saying that, that there was a point when he said that, like when they were laying in bed, he had said that. And it struck me as wrong, so then I started trying to push him for the information at that point.
And the reason you're pushing for the information was so that you could then tell your attorney about it?
Yes.
And then you hoped you'd get a deal on your case?
Yes.
But at the time that you wrote the letter, the matter was still very fresh in your mind?
Yes, it was.
Now, when he told you that she was, on the morning of December 3rd, he was talking about the morning of December 3rd, the morning that she ultimately died. Did he tell you what the position she was in on the bed when he first saw her?
She was on her back the first time he saw her.
And did he tell you what he did after seeing that she was on her back?
He rolled her onto her side.
And did he tell you what happened after he rolled her onto her side?
Yeah, her breathing didn't change at all, and then he rolled her over onto her face.
I'm going to show you this. I'm going to ask this document marked as an exhibit, and I'm going to show it to you.
Does the defense have a copy of what we're talking about?
Yeah.
They do? All right.
Yeah, I've got it.
Documents are marked as State's Exhibit 69. I'm going to ask you to read it to yourself from front to back and let me know when you're finished reading it, okay?
Okay.
And I want you to pay particular attention to what's at the bottom of page 5, the top of page 6.
Okay.
All right, we got to take a break. We got an issue with the jury, so.
Okay.
We are back on the record on Mark D. Jensen, 2002 CF 314. The appearances are the same. Mr. Dillard is still on the stand, but the jury is not in the courtroom except for one juror. And for the record, who is the juror that is in the courtroom?
Judge, I'm sorry, if I could just, I'd suggest this actually be done without Mr. Dillard present. I know that's a huge pain.
Can we take them in the hallway? The jury's in the back. They're not going to see Mr. Dillard.
Take them out this way then. Well,
Take them in the hallway. There, because I don't want you to take any pictures of the juror. Okay, for the record, Mr. Dillard now is outside the courtroom. Sir, what is your name for the record?
My name is Travis Bartz, TravisBartz.
Talk to the court, correct?
That is correct.
And I told the attorney in the conference room, we had Ms. McNeil there and Mr. Perry there, so both sides were represented. And I believe what you told us was that you knew Mr. Dillard, but you knew him from a different name, and that he had dated your sister, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So who, does the state or the defense wish to voir dire this witness at this time?
The juror? Yes, I would like to.
Why don't you sit down so you can use the microphone, Mr. Jamboys?
Thank you, Honor. So, sir, how long ago was that?
It was about, I would say, about 2 years ago.
Okay. And how long did you date your sister?
For about, I want to say, a year.
Okay. And what name did he use?
I believe it was Aaron Swanson.
Okay. And would that experience affect your ability to consider the credibility or the testimony of this witness?
It's a difficult question. His experience, that's all I can say is his experience with my sister. I do not care for this individual. However, I'm taking his testimony and everything I hear as it is, and my job is to be impartial.
Do you think you could set your personal views about him aside and just consider the testimony based upon what you hear in the courtroom today?
Yes.
I don't have a problem with this juror serving, Your Honor.
Right, Mr. Perry, you want a voir dire?
If I could just have a second. Just one
You
second.
need a moment? Yeah. You're on the jury, sir. Thank you for that information. I'll make a finding that based on the voir dire, Mr. Jamboys, he can remain. The defense did not wish to voir dire the juror. Go in the back and
There is one. I'd request that the juror be instructed to not discuss this aspect with.
I agree. Do you understand that, sir? Yes. They're going to ask you the minute you go back there. Just tell them the judge is the bad guy. He said no. Okay? All right. And then we're going to bring them out, and we got to get Dillard back.
Judge,
Are we still, is the court reporter still here? All right. I can't see with this monitor.
sounds happy to be here. I do have a request that before we.
I'll close it.
Go ahead, Mr. Terry.
I'd ask that before we, obviously we're not breaking right now, but before we break for the weekend, I'd ask that the court give the jury, again, that instruction that it gave at the very start of the trial, since we're heading into a weekend, about not watching media, not all of that, just the reminder. And, I don't know if you still have that sheet.
I think I should also give that instruction to the lawyers.
Not to watch the media?
Yes.
Oh, we're avoiding it like the plague.
Come on, it's Friday. You got to laugh. I'll give that instruction. Let's bring them back out.
All rise for the jury.
Okay, we're back on the Jensen matter, 2002 CF 314. The appearances are the same. Mr. Dillard is still on the stand, still under oath. You can continue, Mr. Jamboys.
Mr. Dillard, have you finished reading that letter?
I'm getting through on page 5 right now.
Okay, well, just let me know when you've finished reading the letter, okay?
I've read it.
Okay, thank you. Now, did Mr. Jensen explain to you why he wanted to get the Ambien from the doctor?
Yeah, to help her sleep through the symptoms of the antifreeze.
Now, at the time that you wrote this letter to your attorney, the matters were fresher in your mind than they are today, many years later?
Yes, definitely.
And now that you've read that letter, does that refresh your recollection as to the sequence of events about what he did as he was killing her that day?
Yes.
So she was, first of all, she was sleeping on her back?
Yes.
And then what happened?
Then he rolled her over a little bit on her side.
And did he indicate whether she woke up or not?
No.
And so then what did he do with her face?
That's when he rolled her over again further and rolled her onto her from her side to her face, like on her stomach. And then that's when he pushed her face into the pillow and sat on her back.
And did he tell her did he tell you what happened when he sat on her and with her face pushed into the pillow?
Yeah, she passed away.
Did he indicate to her? Did he indicate to you how he intended to use her mental status against her?
Yes, he was going to play that against her, saying her family was nuts, that somebody in her family committed suicide, that they were all on some kind of psychiatric medication, that he was going to use that against her to play that off as she committed suicide herself.
Did he say anything about having some photos or pictures?
Yes, he did. He said that was
that
was part of the thing. He said he cheated, or she cheated on him, and there was some pictures of her giving him oral sex.
There were pictures of her giving who oral sex?
I think it was a colleague of hers, somebody she was cheating on him with.
And did he provide you descriptions of this?
Just said that it was pictures of him giving somebody else oral sex.
Now, after you had obtained this information from Mark Jensen, how soon after you obtained this information did you write this letter to Attorney Gretchen Rosenke?
About a week.
Is it about a week later?
About a week later.
So where were you when you wrote this letter?
At Dodge Correctional.
And you were very upfront. You wanted Ms. Rosenke to see what she could do to work out a deal on your behalf.
That's correct.
Now, did you learn about any of the details of this case from any document or anything other than the mouth of Mark Jensen?
No, I did not.
So the only thing you'd seen was the transcript of the testimony of Ed Klug?
That is correct.
From the forfeiture hearing?
That is correct.
Marked as Exhibit 70. I don't want you to read it out loud. I just want you to look at it. And if you look at it, can you tell me whether you recognize it?
Yes. Yes, I can.
And what is that?
The transcript from Edward Klug's hearing.
When Edward Klug had previously testified?
Yes.
So had you read that before?
Yes, I have.
Did Mark Jensen let you read the whole thing?
Yes.
Aside from that document that was marked as Exhibit 70, was there any other document that Mark Jensen showed you when you were in the Kenosha County Jail with him?
No.
Did you try to go into his cell to look for additional documents?
No.
Is there a rule in the county jail about inmates going into other inmates' cells?
You're not allowed to enter.
What happens if you do?
You get conduct reports, possibly put in a hole.
Now, you're sitting here in Prison Blues. Have you ever been convicted of a crime?
Yes, I have.
How many times?
11.
Now, and you've got 3 cases pending in Waukesha County right now in addition to those 11, right?
That's correct.
You haven't been convicted of those crimes yet.
That's correct.
And when you're done testifying here, you're hoping that this, well, in fact, the prosecutor has promised, I promised I'm going to write a letter to the prosecutor in Waukesha County indicating that and to your defense attorney, indicating that you've testified in this case, correct?
That is correct.
And I'm going to indicate in the letter that whether you've testified truthfully or untruthfully. Is that correct?
That's correct.
but I specifically told you I was not going to make any recommendation for leniency. Isn't that true?
That's correct.
So you're not expecting any recommendation of leniency from me or from Ms. McNeil?
Correct.
So let's talk about the process of the communication between you and Mr. Jensen. How many hours was it that you'd spoken to Mr. Jensen before he started telling you about committing the crime?
I would say a good 9 hours, 10 hours.
So tell us about that. How was it? What did you see about the transformation in Mark Jensen, where he started out in total denial, and then did he start making piecemeal admissions, or did he just admit it all at once?
He kind of admitted all at once, but it was more like I kept pushing him a little bit, saying, you did it. If you did it, just tell you did it, and then we'll work our way around it. And that's kind of when he started telling. But it was he wanted to talk. He just seemed like he wanted to keep talking.
So some of these prior offenses you've had, they're for things like forgery and for fraud of some sort, correct?
Correct.
You promise people things and you get them to give you money?
Yes.
And then you don't deliver on the promises that you've made?
That's correct.
So you have this kind of skill set that induces people to trust you?
Correct.
And then they give you information or they give you money?
That's correct.
Now, did you apply any particular effort in this regard to try to persuade Mr. Jensen to trust you?
Yes, I did.
What are the kind of things that you did to try to get Mr. Jensen to trust you?
Just talking about his case, giving him ways out, and trying to help him see where he could maybe make a defense out of something, and then tell him, I kind of feel, I told him that I think he did it, and things like that, and then it just brought it out.
So you tried to make it sound like, hey, I'm on your side on this.
Yes.
And you were being friendly to him.
Correct.
And, he'd indicated, or you had seen that he was being picked on or intimidated by at least one of the other inmates. Is that true?
That's correct.
And right now and back then, you were about the same size.
Correct.
And how big are you?
6'2", 260-something.
So people don't mess with you in the jail?
Not really.
Yeah. And while you were with Mr. Jensen, this guy that had been picking on him was leaving him alone?
Correct.
So it was kind of like you were sort of a protector to him as well?
Yeah, in a way, I suppose.
I mean, you didn't tell him you were expressly going to protect him, but while he was talking with you, nobody was messing with him.
That's correct.
So tell us some of the things you did to gain his trust.
Tried to help him with possible scenarios, like with the tox screen reports that were supposedly lost. I told him to get the information and try to have your attorney test those samples, so that way, if the samples don't exist, you can try to throw that evidence out.
And that was actually, that was legitimate advice on your part, right? I mean, you thought that was true.
Yeah.
So in some sense, you were trying to help him.
Yeah.
Early on.
Yes.
And at what point was it, at some point you decided instead of helping him, you were going to try to help yourself?
When I kind of figured out through our conversations, that he more than likely did it, and I pushed him into telling the truth.
Now, tell us about the time when you saw a change in him, where he was going to start telling you about this.
Well, I mean, when he was talking about his kids, he was getting a little bit more teary-eyed and a little bit more emotional and things. And when he started showing emotions is when I kind of pushed him a little harder.
And why was that? Why would you start pushing a little harder when you started showing a little bit of emotion?
It was interesting to me to see where it was going to go.
And can you kind of pinpoint the point at which you decided you were going to try to use this information against him to benefit you?
The morning of the 16th. I mean, I had thought about it, but the morning of the 16th is when I came to terms with it.
And what was it about that had happened on the morning of the 16th?
He told me the truth.
He told you the truth. He told you that he'd murdered his wife.
Yes.
Now, did he tell you anything about the type of Benadryl or the form of Benadryl that Julie was taking at the time in the days preceding her death?
Yeah, gel caps.
And did he make any remark about the fact that it was gel caps as
Yeah.
opposed to liquid Benadryl?
Yes, he did.
Did he tell you anything? Well, let me think if I can get it right. Did he tell you anything about the difference or the importance of gel caps versus liquid Benadryl?
Yes, he did. He said that he laughed at your when you were questioning him. He said that you threw a bottle of gel or liquid caps on the table and said you poisoned Julie with Benadryl and antifreeze, and he was laughing at that fact because he only had gel caps, and there was no way to mix that much antifreeze into the gel cap or the liquid caps.
He told you that I had thrown a bottle of gel caps on the...
Or maybe it was either you or the detective were questioning him.
Or the
said-
detective,
Yeah,
okay.
and said you used this Benadryl to, poison her and mixed it with antifreeze.
And he laughed about that.
Yeah.
And instead of thinking it might have been, he was talking about the detective.
I believe it was the detective. Sorry.
That's okay. During the course of your conversation with him, did he ever mention any other drugs or substances that Julie was ingesting?
Just Librium, St. John's wort, Paxil, Ambien, and I think that's pretty much it. I think that's all he said, from what I remember.
Now, he told you at one point he dropped the kids off at school. Did he tell you what he did after he dropped the kids off at school?
Yeah, he had to pick up a check from a client.
Did he tell you about what happened after he picked up the kids and brought them home?
Yeah, he said that when he went home, because he already knew she was dead, that he made them stay outside the room and wouldn't let them in, and then said, he had to call the ambulance because she passed away.
Now, you'd indicated he'd also talked about poisoning her once before.
Yes.
And tell us about, when did he have that conversation with you?
He had that conversation. That was kind of the start of the whole telling of the truth. He told me that he poisoned her on that trip that he went to with work, with that trip that Ed Klug happened. And that's when he said he poisoned her on that trip, and she had thrown up all over the house. And he said that he was glad that she didn't die on that trip.
Did he tell you why he's glad that she didn't die?
Because he ran his mouth off to Edward Klug.
Did he tell you anything about any antifreeze in the residence?
Yeah, he said that there was 2 things of pool antifreeze in his garage that you guys had missed in your pictures. And he was going to use that as a defense as well.
Mr. Dillard, is everything that you've testified to in this courtroom the truth as you know it to the best of your ability?
Yes, it is.
You swear that's true?
I swear it's true.
I have no further questions.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there's no way we're going to be able to do the cross today. I don't want to start and have the defense then be at the disadvantage that they have to restart, and it just creates a lot of issues. So you get to go home, but before you go home, I just want to remind you, I'm not going to read exactly the instruction, but you have to understand you cannot listen to the radio, watch TV, read any newspapers, go on the internet. There's a lot of media coverage, and obviously that's the right of the media to report cases. We do live in the United States of America. But please don't do that. You've been very good. You've been showing up on time. I've been giving you a short lunch. I think you're taking this case serious, but please don't do that. So, Monday, 8:30. Have a good weekend, folks.
To talk
Yeah,
about
we're going to. Mr. Dillard leave? Sure. Take Mr. Dillard. While the court TV is still in the courtroom and the professional photographers are in the courtroom, I appreciate all your work that you have listened to the court when we told you not to film and not to take pictures of the jury. I really appreciate that. I think the media is doing a very professional job. I just wanted to say that. Okay, go ahead.
We did receive information that the juror's name was broadcast on audio on court TV.
Well,
just wanted to put that on the record.
Right. I mean, anybody could go look and get the jury list. It's not confidential.
Not making an issue out of it, just making a record of it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole world could go to the clerk's office and get the whole list. So, right?
I think that's true.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, we'll see you Monday. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
You're still holding them? Okay, take the defendant.